What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the MAGA Fight. I am Michael Rogers, and we've got the potential for a damn good show today. We're going to talk about one of my favorite historical events, the sinking of the Lusitania, which inevitably got us involved in World War I. But more importantly, we're going to talk about how that relates to the situation that we find ourselves in today, compare, contrast some things. I'm really looking forward to it. But we're also going to talk about a wide range of other things today. We're going to talk about population and birth rates. We're going to talk about election. And we're going to talk about climate change because it's all relevant in the last couple of weeks and the conversation that's been going on. But before we get into all that, first things first. On our last episode, 2 weeks ago, I made possibly a controversial statement. And I stated that in a theoretical situation where we ended up with Ron DeSantis and President Trump both running for the Republican nomination in 2024, I may have to go Ron DeSantis. Now, when I said that, it was really pretty much right off the cuff. It was a recent thought that I had been thinking, like that morning before I did the podcast, and I still think exactly what I said then, that I may have to go Ron DeSantis in that situation. But I've had a little more time to think it over, a little more time to think, well, why would I make that choice? And I think for me, what it really comes down to at the end of the day is that Ron DeSantis is very much Trump-like, but he has the government experience. He has the experience of, for example, picking a cabinet, advisors, all of those political things that go into holding office. And I think that was I think Trump's weakest spot during his presidency, was not being able to get a cabinet that he could fully trust, fully rely on. I mean, DC's full of a bunch of rats. Who knew? I know, big shocker. But and he got criticized for having his family in a lot of positions around him. But I would defend that choice and say, what other choice did he have? It's the only people he could actually count on at the end of the day, and they all did a great job at their jobs. So, but I think that is where Ron DeSantis is going to be well rounded out, as he's going to have that experience. He's going to probably be better able to pick his cabinet and those that surround him. He's got that prior experience. And I think that also he may even have the advantage of being a better communicator. He's lived that politician's life. He knows how to talk the talk, walk the walk, pick the cabinet, all that. But he's also got the right beliefs, the right ideology, and he's very much willing to fight for what he believes in, much like Trump. But I think swinging back the other way, though, some areas where maybe he won't be able to match Trump, because everybody's got their pros and their cons, is, I don't, where Trump was, a bulldog. I think that Ron DeSantis maybe, we won't get quite the ferocity out of him, or quite the Trump was just attack. It's all he knew, and it's what he needed to do, and it was what we needed. It's what we needed him to do, and it's what he had to do because that's what the left was doing to him. But in the same situation, I don't know if DeSantis would be quite as quite as aggressive as Trump was, but I think he'll be on the points where it matters, civil liberties, America first, immigration, all that. I think we're going to fully be able to count on Ron DeSantis, and with his other experience he brings to the table, I think that he would just be, as far as the table sits right now, the right choice for 2024 in that situation. So I just wanted to break that down a little more, clarify it a little bit more, at least from where I was seeing things. Of course, I'm always open to having discussions, hearing thoughts and opinions. Please, by all means, feel free to leave a comment. You can also follow me on social media at mrogers87 on Clout Hub and Parler. I do also have a Twitter again now, which is at mrogers8787, because, Twitter. And I think that username is probably still taken from my last account, but I deleted that a long time ago, so I don't know, it's probably bots or whatever. So it's mrogers87, and then if you're on Twitter, just do the 87 twice, mrogers8787, or just search my actual name, Michael Rogers, because that's my name. Now, one of the other stories from the week prior to last was the Senate got together, passed this bill. They marketed it as, this is a rare example of us, the parties meeting in the middle and working across the aisle and all that good bullshit. And they said that they marketed it as a bill to bolster competitiveness with China. Now, I had the article here. We were going to go through it and break it down a bit. But when I went to bring it up for the recording, it wasn't available anymore for some reason, or something was going on with it. And I want to take the time to get another article. But essentially, this is just another corporate welfare bill when you dig into it. That's all it is. It's just, wow, more free money to the auto industry for, I don't know, competitiveness, I guess, which we all know is just going to turn into the auto industry's next round of political donations, and around we go. So, I mean, by all means, I encourage you to look it up for yourself. But it's just another corporate welfare handout, I mean to say, and nothing really much there. So moving on to elections now. This has actually been picking up and getting very interesting in the last couple of weeks. Now we've had these audits and discussions and things going on pretty much since the election, but now it's starting to pick up with the audits and stuff. And I'm starting to notice some trends here. So to start off, we have an article here from the Gateway Pundit. And this one is titled, "Every State Should Be Audited. Now a Concerned Citizen in Massachusetts Uncovers Election Discrepancies." This article is written by Joe Hoft, and it's from the Gateway Pundit. And it starts off, "The 2020 election results in every state should be forensically audited using the same method that is taking place in Arizona now. We've reported on concerns with the results of elections in Massachusetts previously. This is how we discovered MIT PhD Dr. Shiva, who had uncovered an anomaly in the election results in the Senate primary in Massachusetts. He identified a pattern in the results in his 2020 primary, and he saw the same anomaly in the 2020 presidential results in Michigan. We already knew that the results of the 2020 Senate primary were suspect, so when a concerned citizen in Massachusetts reached out to us with his story, we listened. Our reader shared that at the beginning of December 2020, and initially with a request made verbally and in person, he asked the Mansfield Town Clerk for elections reports for the 2020 local election and the November 3rd national election. He mentioned that he wanted the reports because he was intending to run for local office in 21. At first, he was given copies of files that were loaded onto memory sticks or thumb drives in what appears to be an Excel-like format. But these files were incomplete. For example, the local election had 1,400 plus voters, but the report had only about 1,100 voters listed. Similarly, the November election had 16,000 plus voters, but he received a report indicating less than 13,000 voters participated. Then, after more requests and no response, our reader made a call to the Secretary's Elections Division and described the situation. Within hours of that call, I received an email with several PDF files attached that are lists of names of persons that voted, although in some instances it is not clear if these are persons that actually voted. These PDF files appeared to be grouped into 6 precincts, but his town has 7 precincts. One precinct, Precinct 5, was not included. Our reader received the following letter from the state to the local town representative encouraging the town to obtain all of the information and provided it to the requester. This has not yet been done. And then this article goes on to detail emails and forms and basically emails just flying back and forth from them continually trying to get these records to the clerk on the other end, playing a bunch of bureaucracy bullcrap as always. And, of course it's, we'll get it to you as soon as we can. And then, more time goes by, nothing happens, they never get back to you. So then you make another request. Hey, remember, by law, we're asking for this. Can you please get it to us sometime in the recent present? Oh, yeah. Well, we're still having troubles. I don't know what happened, but yes, we will get that out as soon as possible. But it's just the back and forth of bureaucracy. I will link this article in the description. I encourage you to take a look at it, read the back and forth emails, dive in a little bit deeper. But it's the same shenanigans we've been seeing ever since the election. It's a good example of what's happening in multiple locations. Now, on the other side of that, you can see that this is all making the left very nervous. So we have now an article from The Guardian. And this article is titled Arizona Ballot Audit Packed by Secretive Donors Linked to Trump's Inner Circle. So here we go now. It's going to be, you know where this is going. It's going to be Trump and the racists and, domestic terrorists, January 6th, Charlottesville, all the key words. And, this is just these people trying to discredit us. So the article starts off here. Dark money groups tied to Donald Trump's inner circle and backed by people who have spread baseless claims about the 2020 presidential election appear to be playing a key role in funding an unprecedented review of 2.1 million ballots in Arizona. All right, so let's just pause for a second. Now, already, you can see the differences between the two articles. In the first article, they're simply saying, this is what happened. Somebody noticed anomalies. There was oddness going on. He requested information. And ever since then, he's been getting the runaround and hasn't yet received the information. Others have even stepped in, and we still can't get the information. Here's the story. Here's what happened. Now, contrast that against this article, and already it's just full of, well, it is known that these people are garbage. It is known that everything they say is false and not accurate. And, it starts off paragraph one, people who have spread baseless claims all through 2020. And, then they have to, pat themselves on the back. Let's remember that right now we're doing unprecedented review of 2.1 million ballots in Arizona. It's not unprecedented. I don't know why they would use the word unprecedented. Recounts happen all the time, and audits have happened before too. Essentially, I mean, what is an audit other than just a more thorough recount? So getting back to the article here, Republicans in the Arizona State Senate, which authorized the inquiry, allocated $150,000 in state funds to pay for it, just a fraction of the projected overall cost, which is still unknown. The state Senate had enough money in its operating budget to pay for the investigation. The Arizona Mirror reported in April, but chose not to pay the full price. Instead, the effort is being paid for by private donors who remain hidden from the public, according to a review by Open Secrets and The Guardian. So according to our friends and according to us, because they refer to themselves in the third person in corporate terms, this is an article by The Guardian where they say, according to a review by Open Secrets and The Guardian. All right. Arizona Republicans and Cyber Ninjas, the Florida-based company overseeing the review, have refused to say who is providing the rest of the money. Well, yeah, look, so essentially what they're all nervous and mad about here is that it's not just your typical, the government paying itself to look into the government. There's private donors involved. Look, a lot of people really want to get to the bottom of what actually happened in places like Arizona, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, all over the country. They really want to get to the bottom of what happened. And if that means that they have to fund it themselves, or whatever the case may be, then that's what's got to happen, because it's never going to get done otherwise, and it's certainly not ever going to get done properly. I mean, I think anybody with some common sense would admit that, if the government is paying itself to audit the government, then you're really not going to get anywhere, and you're just, it's just a bullshit way for them to pay themselves to put out good PR about themselves. So I fully support it. Whoever the backers are, I mean, I'm glad that people are fighting to get to the bottom of it all over the place. There's two stories just covering a little bit of what's going on in Massachusetts and a little bit of what's going on in Arizona. And I saw this morning on the news, I also saw where now with the Georgia audit, now they believe that some absentee ballots may be missing in Georgia as well. And I mean, how convenient. That's the pattern that I'm starting to notice here, is that in every case there's ballots that go missing. And mark my words, Georgia is going to be the same. So they're already saying, hey, there may be some absentee ballots we can't find. We don't seem to know where they are. They're going to turn up. Watch, next week or sometime soon, they're going to show up just like they did in Arizona, and then it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be a bunch of left-wing articles are going to come out, and they're going to say, see, they weren't lost like everybody claims. They were just, sitting in this weird place where they shouldn't have been sitting, and look, we just magically found them. Big shock. Same thing that happened in Arizona. And to my mind, now I'm starting to notice a pattern that it's always the absentee ballots that go missing. The regular, straightforward in-person votes are always there, ready to go, accounted for at a moment's notice. But all these absentee and mail-in ballots, the ones that where all the controversy surrounds, the ones that are actually in question, those are the ones that keep going missing. And then they magically get found a week or two later. And then it's a bunch of, oh, nothing to see here. Now, they're going missing during these audits. So I think that from there, it doesn't take very much for me to think, well, maybe they're being fixed, you know, or whatever the case may be. So in every single case of these audits going on, a batch or a certain number of these absentee ballots will go missing while the audit's going on. And then at some point, a little while later on, it'll magically pop back up again and they'll all be good to go. I mean, I'm not saying it's a thing, but it's curious. It's worth looking into. It's worth finding out more about. That's all I'm saying. Now, moving on to climate change briefly, because the left is always talking about climate change, but one of the funny notables from week before last, pretty much everything we talk about today, if it's a news story, is going to be the week before last, because nothing really happened this week except for Biden went to the G7 summit and made a fool out of all of us. So that's really so far the only real notable big news of this week is that Biden went to G7 summit and embarrassed all of us in front of everybody. So that's not news. We all knew it was going to happen. But we'll just keep on pretending that that's the president. Anyway, real briefly covering climate change, one of the funny notables was they had Bill Nye testify on climate change. The guy's not even a scientist. I mean, and then he's given like this wacky comparison about how he's an aircraft engineer, and so aircrafts have to do with air, so he knows a little bit about air, and boy, that air is a changing, and if we don't do something about it quick, then everything's gonna die, and everything will be underwater. The spiel. And then I got to thinking, normally this is the part where we come in and we try to show some statistical data and this and that. But I got to thinking on real simple terms here. Simple guys think on simple terms. What can I say? And I mean, they've been pushing this nonsense since the 70s. I mean, since the 70s, they've been saying, Florida's going to go underwater in a decade or two, or, within 30 years, it'll be underwater, or, all the sea levels are going to rise, and the climate's going to change so much. And every, sometimes it's slightly long term, like they'll say, 30 years from now or 50 years from now. And then every 15 years, it's also, well, if we don't make drastic changes within the next 15 years, then it's all over and there's no going back. That's what they said about, 95 to 2000. And then 15 years later, it was, okay, no, but really, if we don't do something in the next 15 years, we're done. And if you don't believe me, listen to this 12-year-old from Europe. How dare you? See? Told you. If you don't do something right now, it's all over. But I just got to thinking on real simple terms here. Okay, so this has been going on since the 70s. And the main reason I'm poking fun at this right now is just because we've had all these debates already. So instead of going over the same nonsense over and over and over again, I just felt like poking a little fun at it on real simple terms. Like, the fact that they've been pushing this since the 70s, and the Florida coastline has been exactly the same since the 70s. All the beach houses are still in the same spot. Broaden that to nationally. I mean, all the beaches are exactly where they've always been, and the water hasn't risen. Florida hasn't gotten smaller. And places where you are losing beach, it's beach erosion, which is very well known and common. That's what happens. So I don't know. But also on top of that, it's also like, yeah, no duh, because the climate's always gonna change. It's not, the climate has always changed. It's always going to change. Just 10,000 years ago, or it was an ice age. So imagine during the ice age when that started to end. Now that you want to talk about some global warming, that would have been some. That would have been some global warming. And species went extinct. It's what happened. Specifically, it's what happens to animals that aren't at all diversified or adaptable, such as something like a woolly mammoth, a saber-toothed tiger. And you're seeing that today with things like polar bears, because they're very specific in their evolution. They are made for that specific climate, and that's all. So when that climate begins to see a drastic change, then it usually doesn't bode well for them. These things happen. I mean, and it's good that we have groups that are trying to help them, and awareness and all that good stuff. Like a lot of things, I think climate change is just another thing that started out with good intentions, and now it's just become this monster of nonsense. Because nobody disagrees. I think if you ask anybody, everybody thinks that we should have clean air. Everybody thinks that we should have clean water. Most people would agree that, yeah, you don't want factories and corporations just belching out black smoke 24/7 into the atmosphere. That's probably not good things. You probably don't want a lot of runoff going into all your water of chemicals and whatnot. I mean, that's common sense. Of course, you want to be as clean as you possibly can, and take care of the environment as best as you can. And nobody's going to agree with you more than, the people that largely don't believe in climate change, like, your more rural people and your country people and all of that. They live, all right? They live in nature. They live in the sticks. They want it to be clean just as much or more than you do, because they actually live there, they hunt there, they get their meat there, they grow gardens there. Everybody wants clean air and water, is what I'm saying. That's just common sense. But they've just turned it into this whole other beast that now you actually have to actively fight against, because they want to use that to make terrible policy, bankrupt the country and industries, and all kinds of other stuff with the Green New Deal and all that. But I just thought it was funny that they had Bill Nye testify. Um, that's really the only reason I brought it up, because that's so typical of the government and what they do. Every time they have some congressional hearing, or some kind of nonsense, that's what they do. They don't call in like actual working scientists, or they don't call in you know actual people working currently in whatever field they're discussing. No, it's always some you know member of the bureaucracy. It's always, somebody from this federal institute of something, or, it's all Dr. Fauci's, is what I'm saying. Moving on, though. Uh, Birth rates and fertility became a topic over the last couple weeks. Couple reports came out, couple articles and whatnot, and essentially they were just a little concerned. They say U.S. fertility rates are dropping. Birth rates are apparently the lowest they've been since the 70s. And, they were just talking about this in the context of, younger generations not having kids and, their concern going into the future because it's not good for a nation to have a decreasing population for various reasons and whatnot. So I just wanted to take the second, address it, cover it a little bit. Now, population growth is good for, in most cases, a country wants to have a growing population. It makes you better able to defend the country and makes a better economy and all that stuff. However, I wouldn't say that America is currently in a position to have a growing population. I don't think that our country at the moment can handle a growing population. First of all, it's already growing immensely regardless because of all the illegal immigration we have going on. I mean, millions and millions of people are continuing to enter illegally through our southern border. It is a massive influx of people illegally immigrating through our southern border. It's a mess. So you have that. On top of that, you have a country that produces less and less as time goes on. I mean, if you're not producing, if you don't have jobs, then how the hell can you hope for a growing population? You know, we already have massive problems with homelessness in areas. Of course, all the blue areas popping up like California. Um, you know, I think we're already at our limit for population and what we can sustain. On top of that, more and more as we go, as you know, over the past decades and going into the future, America has become more and more of an unhealthy population. And lo and behold, surprise, an unhealthy population is not going to have great fertility rates. It's going to decrease as the population gets more unhealthy. Now, the weirdness goes when you contrast that and that we are one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world, probably the top medical country in the world by far. And yet look how sick our population is because of all the bullshit that they shove down everybody's throat. Because as everybody knows, it's big pharma. It's all about money. There's no money in curing anything, and there's a shit ton of money in just treating everything, and then also treating the side effects to that treatment, and then treating the side effects to the secondary treatment, and so on and so forth. It's a mess. The best thing you can do for yourself is stay away from the doctor because they're going to tell you have something and you're going to leave with a prescription. Basically, I just wanted to summarize it all simply into just a decreasing population, decreasing fertility rates. Those are all symptoms of much bigger problems. So, you know, maybe less harping on the young people about how they're not having kids and more into understanding and why the hell would anybody want to have kids in the modern day? I mean, it's just it doesn't compute. It doesn't fit. Today's America is not designed for the nuclear family. It's just not. And unless we actually address those issues, this will, as time goes on in the future, become more and more of a problem. I mean, as far as nation building goes, I mean, I think, we could stand to have a shit ton less population everywhere. But as far as building goes, you know, we're not going to be doing well in that area until we fix some things. Now, on to the meat and substance of today's episode. What I've really been looking forward to, the Lusitania. Now, let's talk about this. What if, what if I were to tell you, okay, because a lot of people today, especially on the right, this is something that the right greatly suffers from. People on the right, we just want to be good law abiding citizens. We just want to be left alone. We think of things, many think of things as black and white, good and bad, very simple down the line. So you want to do the right thing, play by the rules, do what's right, and then you expect that when the other side is doing nasty tricks and wrong things, you expect that to expose them. But we're gonna use a little story from history here, compare and contrast, and see, is that really the case though? Because what if I were to tell you, everybody knows about the Lusitania, you learn about it in grade school. It's what got us into World War I officially. And so story goes, Germans sank a passenger ship, killed a bunch of Americans. Those assholes, we went to war, we kicked their ass, yay, the good guys. What if I told you that Germany at this time was much like today's right? What if I told you that Germany was the ones playing by the rules, doing the right thing, trying to go about things the right way, and America and Britain were the dirty scheming scumbags, but we just had better, PR firm? Well, that's essentially exactly what happened. So here's a story. At the time, all right, just before World War I, Germany began to suspect, rightfully so, that we were using passenger ships to transport military goods, uh, arms, and, you know, those kinds of things. Now, they glaze over all the important parts. So it wasn't just they began to suspect that we were using passenger ships, so they started sinking them. What actually happened was that they began to suspect this. So then what they started doing is when their submarines would spot a ship, what the sub would do is it would surface. Now, as soon as the sub surfaces, they've given up their only tactical advantage. And now they're fully exposed and vulnerable, and you might as well come up with a white flag because they're not going to do anything at that point. So they would surface, they would make themselves known to the ship, then they would approach the ship, they would board the ship. In these cases, they would search the ship. If they didn't find anything on the ship, then the ship would go about its way. And if they did find ammunition and arms and military supplies on the ship, then they would call for a transport. A ship would come. Sorry, my computer just started making noise there. Piece of shit. All right. So they would have the people transported off the ship, taken, to where they were going, and then they would sink the ship. I believe, if I'm remembering right, I should have brushed up before I did this. Either that, or either way, they would get the people continued on to where they were going safely, securely, no prisoners, no nothing like that, and they would get rid of the goods or confiscate them. Now, in response to this, what we started doing was we started mounting weapons on the passenger ships, and then we would hide them so that they weren't able to be seen. So we would mount these passenger ships with weapons and ammo and all that good stuff, and then what it would do is it would either be hidden in like a compartment or something where they could bring it out at a moment's notice, or in many cases what they would do is they would install like the bracket mounts for the weapon, and then the weapon would be stored away, but then if needed it could very quickly be brought and just attached right onto the brackets, and you're good to go. So this is what we started doing. So then, when the German subs would surface, exposing themselves, giving up their tactical advantage, we would let them approach, and then we would open fire on them. Now, obviously, right away, this changed things with Germany. They can't just they're gonna have to do something. So what they do is they try to talk directly to the American people. They take out many they take out many ads and papers to the American public at the time. You can research this, you can see this, and essentially saying your government is using passenger ships to transport military goods. We can't have this. And going forward from this point, we are going to have to start sinking these ships if your government doesn't stop. So we urge everybody not to travel for the time being. Blah, 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 blah. Push your government to do the right thing. Yada, yada, yada. Now, on top of this, the Lusitania, on its public record, had arms and ammunition listed on its public record. And then aside from that, in the 20 teens, I forget what year exactly it was, but in the 20 teens, a dive crew actually went down to the Lusitania wreck specifically to search it and search its cargo hold. And they found a good amount of ammunition that was not listed on the manifest, thus, essentially putting the debate down and proving once and for all that, yes, the Lusitania was carrying, illegal arms and ammunition. So this is all known, and I urge everybody, find a good documentary or something to watch about it. It's actually a fascinating story. So by the time we get to this point, this is the context to which we're in. The Germans tried approaching the ships in a civil manner, searching the ships if they were carrying bad things, get the civilians on their way, continue them to where they were going, and get rid of the military supplies. Try to stop all these supplies coming from America. Then we started putting actual mounted guns, weapons on passenger ships to use against the Germans. Then they tried directly talking to the citizens of America. Look, this is what's going on. This is the situation. So please just know that it's happening. Know that, we are going to have to start sinking these ships going forward. And just the best thing, just please don't travel right now. This is not the time to be sailing to Europe. And nobody listened. And not long after that, the Lusitania was sank. Now, when the Lusitania was sank, the sub fired one torpedo that went into the Lusitania, caused an explosion below the waterline. So the ship starts sinking. But one of the mysteries of the Lusitania is not long after that torpedo, there was a massive second explosion that, for all intents and purposes, they don't believe was from the sub. The sub didn't fire two torpedoes. So what they think is that that second explosion was either caused by the boilers, because that's what'll happen. That's why, you know, like in the story of the Titanic, if you watch like the movie The Titanic and you see where it's the you hear all the steam and the loud whistling of all the mechanics and all that, and everybody's trying to yell and talk to each other. They can't hear each other, and then all of a sudden it goes quiet. That's called venting, and that's what those ships used to do back then. That's what they had to do. If they started taking on water or they were sinking, they would have to do what was called venting, which essentially the whole purpose was to vent the boilers and get them to where they weren't going to explode when the cold water hit them. So that's one thing. They think that the boilers could have been a cause for the second explosion, or most likely the arms and ammunition that were carried on board. Just like what happens in battleships and all kinds of war vessels when they get hit. There's always multiple explosions with those ships, because there's the first one when they get attacked, torpedoed, bombed, and then as soon as that ammunition catches fire, or even if it gets caught in the explosion, then there's your second explosion or your enhanced explosion, whatever the case may be. And so the moral of the story is doing the right thing isn't always the right thing. You have to be able to meet your adversaries. You have to be able to effectively fight back against them. Just trying to play the good guy card. That's why they say good guys finish last, nice guys finish last, because it's the truth. And look, the simple fact is that history is written by the victors. The people that win are the people that get to say how it went down. And it's going to be very flattering to them, and it's going to be detrimental to the losing side. And we can already see this happening right now today. As we speak, the left is already writing this history, writing this narrative. It's how it's going to go down. Now, a lot of times, eventually, maybe in the long run, the truth wins out in cases like the Lusitania. But what good is it at this point? What good is knowing the truth about the Lusitania at this point? It doesn't save any of the lives lost on that ship. It doesn't end any of the lives that were caused by us getting involved in World War I, which inevitably caused World War II. But yes, the left and the government is already hard at work writing this historical narrative, what's going to be the historical narrative, if we don't get our shit together. And here's a couple examples. So this first clip here, we have Frank Figualizzi on News Network. He's advocating for the arrest of Trump and all of the left's political adversaries in politics and government. Take a look at this.
Chris Wray testified publicly on the Hill that what happened on January 6th is domestic terrorism. What have we learned from our experience with international terrorism? In order to address that problem, arresting low-level operatives is merely a speed bump, not a roadblock. In order to really tackle terrorism, and this time domestically, you've got to attack and dismantle the command and control element of a terrorist group. And unfortunately, and I know this is painful to hear, that may mean people sitting in Congress right now, people in and around the former president. That's how you do this. Otherwise, recruitment, inciting, and cult-like leadership continues to recruit people to violence.
And there you have it. I mean, look, these people want to talk about fascism, and they want to call people Nazis and Trump a dictator and all that. What's more dictator like? What's more authoritarian like than arresting your political rivals and adversaries? I mean that's straight out the KGB and communism. That's how those governments function. So secondly, here we have an ad put together by the Lincoln Project. Now, when you hear Lincoln Project, just think Rhino Republicans. And they want to get the story straight on who Antifa is. Take a look at this.
Who is Antifa? They stormed the beaches of Normandy, parachuted into the French countryside, and gave their lives to face down and fight back against fascism. They took down Nazi machine gun nests, tore apart the Third Reich's strongholds, liberated concentration camps, liberated France, Italy, Belgium, Holland. Anywhere Antifa saw fascism, they fearlessly and relentlessly annihilated it. Fascism was defeated because of patriots like these, proud Americans who knew that the fight against fascists was not simply a battle between opposing nations. It was a war against inhumanity. A war that isn't nice, but cannot be lost. A war we still fight today. Anti-fascism. It's not a cable news talking point. It's an American ideal that should be memorialized because it was paid for in blood.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Well, there you have it. Yep, they're Antifa, boy. They're the ones that stormed the beach of Normandy, and they're the ones that won World War II, and they're the heroes that continue on in the legacy today. Of course, none of them, Antifa wasn't a thing then, but the left is winning the narrative, and the left is winning the culture, and if we on the right, if we want to get serious about actually fighting back, about actually making America great again, about actually implementing the things that we believe in and keeping America as founded, then we may have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable going forward. It may call for things that normally are outside of normal operating procedure. But the left isn't following the rules when it comes to putting us down. I mean, we just had a report from Tucker Carlson this previous week, showing government documents and proof that FBI agents were essentially the organizers of the January 6th Capitol raid. I mean, and it wasn't very hard for them to discover, because basically the way it's lined out, and I urge all of you to look for it and watch it. It's a great episode from Tucker, and so essentially everybody knows how hard they're hunting down everybody that was remotely associated with January 6th. Anybody that was there, yada, yada, yada. Many of them being kept in solitary confinement and everything that we've covered thus far. Now, the odd anomaly is that there is a couple people, there are some who aren't being charged. And not only that, but the government won't even list their names. So in these specific examples, in the court documents and whatnot, they're called persons of uncharged persons of interest, or persons of interest not being charged, or whatever. But they don't use their name. They list them as person 1, person 2, etc., etc. But then when you get further into the report, it shows that not only were these people there, but these people were organizers in the event. So essentially, you have FBI agents who were organizers of the January 6th Capitol riot. I mean, that's right there. And right away, that makes me think back to, I forget what previous episode it was, but, we talked about the FBI tactics with, right-wing militias, and how the FBI will infiltrate a militia, and then will talk the members into doing a certain thing, and even offer to be able to provide any said materials you need, like explosive bombs, etc. So essentially, they go there, they rile everybody up. They say, you know what, this is bullshit. Let's go bomb this building. And oh, by the way, I can get the TNT. And then they go and get the TNT, and then they charge everybody with the crime. And now it's also coming out that the same thing happened not only with January 6th, but also remember that little story about Gretchen Wilson of Michigan, and there was a plot by a militia to kidnap her in a van and all this. Well, lo and behold, come to find out, 2 or 3 of the members of that group were federal agents. And in fact, the one guy who was talking about getting a bomb and blowing up a bridge as one of their plans was one of the FBI agents. So this is just a repeating tactic that we see time and time again, yet it flies largely under the radar. Most people don't acknowledge it or know about it, but it's very, very common. And like, look at, for example, like January 6th versus the year of riots. You never hear about the riots. They will never once mention them. But one day, January 6th, which paled in comparison to most any of the days and all the riots, they will talk about over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. It becomes a new keyword phrase, and they're going to say it as much as they can. January 6th, insurrection, Charlottesville. These are things that they just say over and over and over again to drive the narrative. And unless we get serious about fighting back against them, unless we become comfortable with fighting fire with fire, we're going to find ourselves in a bad place, because either we're going to lose completely and their vision for America is going to be enacted, or we're going to end up with a right-wing authoritarian, because that's just as likely in this scenario. Look, the check in this country was always supposed to be we the people. And if we the people fail to do their job, then people will eventually elect officials who will do it for them. Let me just give you this example. Let's look at, like, say, 2017, 2018. Trump took office. If he had been able to arrest members of the media, like we talked about, if he had been able to arrest, Hillary Clinton, like we all wanted to happen, lock her up, we would have been fully on board with that, fully accepted it, fully wanted it even, and I would still argue that all those people deserved it and still would deserve it. However, when you look at it as just, straight on, I mean, that's jailing journalists, that's jailing politicians. Exactly the things that, we always want to fight against. But, strange times. So I don't know, just all in all, the moral of the story, nice guys finish last, and doing the right thing isn't always the right thing. And, it's some serious food for thought going forward. So thank you all very much for joining me this week. I had a blast. Can't wait to do it again next week. Thank you very much for your support. See you next time.